Hi there, John McAdams coming to you from the range out here in East Texas again. Now in this video, I'm going to investigate how muzzle velocity changes with barrel length. So to do that, I have a couple different rifles in 3 different chamberings out here. As you can see, I have multiple factory loads for each one of those chamberings. We will shoot 5 shots from each one of those factory loads in each rifle. I will measure the velocity with my Garmin chronograph and we'll see how it changes. So first off, we have my 6-hour M400 upper receiver out here. This is in 5.56 NATO, 16-inch barrel. Now next, I also have a Diamondback DB15 upper receiver out here. This is in 223 Wild, has an 18-inch barrel. Now those are not exactly the same chamberings, but they are very similar and you can safely shoot 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO in each one. So to that end, we're going to shoot some 223 Remington ammo from Winchester's Varmint X-Line, 55 grain bullet, some 223 Remington ammo from the Federal Fusion MSR line with a 62 grain soft point bullet, and some Black Hills factory ammo with 77 grain tipped Sierra Match King bullets. We will also shoot some military surplus ammo, 5.56 NATO, 62 grain green tip full metal jacket bullet. Next, we have 308 Winchester. We'll start off with this Scar heavy rifle, 16-inch barrel. Then we'll move up to this Bergara Ridge rifle with an 18-inch barrel. And then I have my Winchester Model 70 with a 22-inch barrel. In each one of those rifles, we'll shoot these factory loads. I have some Hornady custom light ammo, that is reduced recoil ammo, 125 grain SST bullet. We have some Federal Fusion ammo, 150 grain Fusion soft point bullet. Some Hornady Superformance ammo with a 165 grain CX bullet. And some Federal Terminal Ascent ammo with a 175 grain Terminal Ascent bullet. Next up is the 9.3 by 62. Now I have 2 rifles out here in that chambering. This one is mine. This is a semi-custom Ruger M77 Hawkeye. This rifle started out as a 30-06. I got it rebarreled for a Cape Buffalo hunt many years ago to 9.3 by 62 millimeter Mauser. This rifle has a 22-inch barrel. I also have my dad's rifle out here, which is almost identical to mine. Exact same setup. It also started life as a 30-06, rebarreled to 9.3 by 62. Since we were going to be hunting buffalo together in the same camp, we wanted to make one distinguishing factor between these rifles, and at the same time, we both had the same scope on them. So he got his rifle with a 21-inch barrel. But the rifles are literally identical otherwise. And in 9.3 by 62, I have some PPU 285 grain soft point ammo and some ammo from the Hornady Dangerous Game lineup with a 286 grain bullet. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I will shoot 5 shots from each one of those factory loads in every rifle, measure the velocities, and we'll see how the velocity changes in each case with those different bullet weights, different factory loads, all of those different things in each one of those rifles with different barrel lengths. So let's get shooting and we'll see what sort of velocities we get.
So before we get started, realize I'm not going to show clips from every single load, though I will show a clip from every cartridge I test in this video. I will give you a rundown of all my results at the end of the video. I also did not mention this earlier, but it was about 85 degrees Fahrenheit while I was shooting, and the temperature was very consistent over the course of all of this shooting. Okay, here are the results, and we'll start with the 223 and the 556. Just to orient you to this information, the column labeled advertised velocity, that's just what you think, how fast the manufacturer says this ammo should be going, usually from a 24-inch barrel. The column labeled velocity 16 inches is the velocity of that ammo from a 16-inch barrel. Same with the 18-inch barrel. The red and green velocities below those numbers are the differences between the velocity from that barrel length versus the advertised velocity. Red numbers are actual measured velocities that are lower than advertised. Green velocities are measured velocities that were higher than advertised. The column labeled difference is the difference in velocity between the 16 and 18-inch barrels. Change per inch is the average velocity difference per inch of barrel. So in this specific case, I just took the average velocity difference and divided it by 2. I obtained some very interesting and somewhat unexpected results with these two barrel lengths. So first, we'll start with the Winchester ammo. Very little change with the 55 grain Varmint X ammo. Both were way slower than what Winchester advertised. The 18-inch barrel was just 4 feet per second faster on average than the 16-inch barrel, but they were basically equal. The same was true with the Federal Fusion ammo, but there is an interesting twist here. This stuff shot faster than advertised in both rifles and was actually a little bit faster out of the 16-inch barrel, though once again, actual measured velocities were nearly identical between these two barrel lengths. This particular Federal ammunition is specifically designed for use in shorter barreled so-called modern sporting rifles like the AR-15s I used in this test. So unlike the Winchester ammo here, for instance, which is best used in longer barreled bolt-action rifles for varmint hunting, you could certainly use it in an AR, but this Winchester load seems to perform best out of a rifle with a 24-inch or even a 26-inch long barrel. But this Federal ammo is designed and marketed for use in semi-automatic rifles with shorter barrels. As you can see, this Federal 62 grain ammo has lower advertised performance specs than the green tip 62 grain ammo. Interestingly, though both rifles shot the Federal ammo faster than advertised, both were still slower than the 62 grain green tip bullets out of both rifles. And like I mentioned, it was actually a little faster out of the rifle with the 16-inch long barrel. The 62 grain green tip and 77 grain tipped Match King loads are both more along the lines of what I expected. The longer barreled rifle shot that ammo a little bit faster. Not much, but a little. Really, with the 223 and 556 ammo, I was quite frankly pretty surprised at how little difference there was in velocity between these two upper receivers. I'll cover the takeaways from this again at the end of the video, but this is a good example of how there is more to velocity than just barrel length. Let's move on to the 308 Winchester now. Since I used 3 different rifles with 3 different barrel lengths, there are 3 different columns for the velocities I obtained during the test. Like it says, figures in the difference column are, from left to right, going from 16 inches to 18 inches, 18 inches to 22 inches, and then from 16 inches to 22 inches. Similar deal with the change per inch. For example, let's start with the Hornady custom light ammo with the 125 grain SST. Just like you would expect, the 16-inch SCAR had the lowest velocities. The Bergara with the 18-inch barrel shot that stuff faster. And then finally, my Model 70 with the 22-inch barrel shot this ammo the fastest. Velocity jumped up 70 feet per second or 35 feet per second per inch, going from 16 to 18 inches, then an additional 28 feet per second or 7 feet per second per inch, going from 18 inches to 22 inches. Overall, I observed a 98 foot per second gain in velocity going from 16 inches to 22 inches, or about 16 feet per second per inch. Everything here was pretty much like I'd expect. All the loads were slower than advertised, with the 16-inch barrel being the slowest and the 22-inch barrel being fastest on average. As you can see, there is a bigger jump in performance going from 16 to 18 inches in barrel length than there is from 18 inches to 22 inches. That is also what I expected. Heck, as a side note, this test really made me start to appreciate that Bergara 308 with the 18-inch barrel, which provided a great mix of excellent performance in a very compact and handy package. Now let's wrap things up with the 9.3 by 62. Very interesting results with the PPU ammo. This is another example of the shorter barreled rifle having a higher velocity, though once again, not by much. Like you see, both rifles shot this ammo almost at exactly the same velocity. Now, to be fair, this was a lower performance round, shooting a bullet nearly the same weight as the Hornady ammo, but advertised going about 100 feet per second slower. For reference, my Nosler reloading manual is showing a couple of hand loads delivering close to these advertised velocities of about 2,260 and 2,360 feet per second, respectively, with a 286 grain partition. Yes, that's not the same bullet I used here with the PPU or the Hornady ammo, but I found it interesting just the same, and it looks like about a 2 grain difference in powder charge was sufficient to get that additional 100 foot per second or so of velocity with that bullet weight in the 9.3. That also held true for several different powder types they had listed in the reloading manual. With that in mind, 21 inches looks like it was enough for close to a complete powder burn with a powder charge sufficient to deliver the velocities I obtained with the PPU ammo, and there was no real advantage to the longer barrel here with that lower performance PPU ammo. That also makes sense and is also what I expected. After all, you'll need a longer barrel to burn a bigger powder charge, all other things being equal. Now, the Hornady ammo shot about 25 feet per second faster out of the longer barreled rifle. That is almost exactly what I would have guessed prior to this test. And it also looks like about another 1 to 2 inches of barrel length would have gotten us to Hornady's advertised velocity with that ammo, which they state as 24 inches. That is also what I expected. Okay, final conclusions here. First off, your mileage may vary with all of this stuff, and your mileage actually probably will vary with this stuff. Beware of small sample size bias too. You shoot 20 shots for each one of these loads instead of 5 like I did, and you'll probably get slightly different results. Probably not wildly different, but potentially different nonetheless. And yes, I also realize that this is not a true apples to apples comparison. Shooting rifles from different manufacturers, different action types like semi-auto and bolt action like I did with the 308, and even different chambers like with the 5.56 NATO and the 223 wild chambers, that definitely complicates things. Even the 9.3 by 62 millimeter comparison with identical rifles gets you about as close as you can get to the truth in practical terms, but there are still some potential variations from rifle to rifle. Now, there are quote-unquote rules of thumb about velocity change with changing barrel length, but realize that is just a rule of thumb, not something set in stone. Barrel length does matter, but that is not the only variable. This is a great example of how it is possible to get virtually identical velocities with the same ammo in rifles of different barrel lengths. It also shows how it's possible a rifle with a shorter barrel can shoot the same ammo even faster than a different rifle with a longer barrel. I can't recall the exact details, but I remember running across an example of this several years ago with an ammo manufacturer. I think it was Buffalo Bore, but don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure. Now, they often publish a couple different muzzle velocities for their ammo out of rifles with different barrel lengths. Well, for this particular ammo, and I apologize, I don't remember the cartridge or the rifle with the longest barrel actually had by far the slowest velocity with that ammo. So yes, barrel length matters, but so do other things. Well, what are those other factors? Well, first, the quality of the barrel matters. And in that vein, variation in bore and chamber dimensions, even tiny variations in those dimensions, can result in wildly different velocities too. The same thing is true for a barrel that is fully broken in. I mentioned this in my 7mm PRC velocity video. In that video, I talked about how I noticed about a 75 foot per second increase in average velocity going from a brand new to a fully broken in barrel with that cartridge. This will happen with just about every barrel to one degree or another. There is variation from rifle to rifle, but any barrel will speed up a little bit after it is done breaking in. So someone shooting a brand new rifle will be getting slower velocities at first than they will with the same rifle after they get several boxes through it. Now, in the 223-556 comparison, I had that 16-inch 5.56 NATO upper receiver for nearly 10 years before I bought the 18-inch 223 Wild. I have a bunch of rounds through the 223 Wild. I couldn't tell you how many offhand, but I don't have nearly as many as I do through that rifle as I do through the 556. Maybe that explains why it wasn't delivering the velocity increases I expected over the 16-inch 556. Maybe it's not fully broken in yet. Now, that rifle also has a chamber that is similar. Remember, it's a 223 Wild chamber versus a 556 NATO chamber. So it is very similar. You can shoot the same ammo in both of them safely, but it's not exactly the same either. That also potentially accounts for some of the difference. The cleanliness of the barrel matters here too. Let's say you take a barrel that has hundreds of rounds through it and you chronograph it with a given ammo in that state. Then you clean the heck out of the barrel, remove all the fouling from it. Then you shoot that same ammo through the same barrel afterwards. It may be counterintuitive, and this is also not a hard and fast rule. It can go the other way here too, but you will probably notice a decrease in velocity from that clean barrel. As you continue to put rounds through it, that velocity will probably gradually climb upwards. But realize there is a huge set of variables to consider here as well. No hard and fast rule. And once again, you should not observe a tremendous difference in velocity here either. So a difference, but not a gigantic one. And so this could explain some of the differences I observed in this video too. I'll bet that 556 upper I have has more fouling than my 223 Wild upper. Next, the ammo factors into this equation as well. Especially for the 223, 556, and 308, I tested out a bunch of different ammo types from different manufacturers with different bullet weights. This probably meant I was dealing with multiple types and amounts of powder with different burn rates that just required different barrel lengths for optimum performance. Temperature matters here too. Modern powder is pretty temperature stable, certainly much more stable than was the case 50 or 100 years ago, but nothing is perfectly temperature stable. Guys shooting in really cold weather will notice a decrease in velocity for a given ammo in a given rifle. Likewise, people shooting in very hot weather will notice an increase in velocity. I did all my shooting for this test in around 85 degrees Fahrenheit weather. It was getting pretty warm, but there was very little temperature variation within this test. It started out warm, did not change much at all, maybe like 1 degree while I was shooting. So it probably didn't affect things much at all for me in this video, but yes, this is also something that will affect muzzle velocity in general. All right, so what does all this mean? Yes, in general and on average, you will probably get higher muzzle velocities with longer barrels. And in general, you will probably observe the biggest increases in muzzle velocity when starting out with a shorter barrel. For instance, you'll probably see a bigger jump in muzzle velocity for a given cartridge, like the 308 here, by going from a 16 to an 18-inch barrel than you would from an 18 to a 20-inch barrel. But it's not a guarantee, and the barrel length is not the only factor that will affect muzzle velocity. And yes, like I mentioned, there are absolutely instances where you could get a faster muzzle velocity with a shorter barrel. Now, I would not say that the 20 to 30 foot per second per inch of barrel rule of thumb is wrong. That's probably a good place to start if you're just trying to guess a velocity based solely on barrel length. But it is also an oversimplification. As always, I still highly recommend verifying your velocity for best results instead of guessing, especially if you're going to be shooting at longer range, where changes in velocity make a much bigger difference. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful and interesting. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel right now and hit that like button. Just click on the thumbs up button and the red subscribe button below the video to make sure you don't miss out on any of my new videos about cartridge comparisons, ammo profiles, even ballistic gel tests, and more. I've also put links below the video to articles I've written about some of my favorite pieces of hunting gear like slings, ear protection, and scopes. And for more detailed information on popular hunting cartridges and what they're best suited for, click the link in the video description below or go to huntingguns101.com to get a free ebook I have written on the best hunting calibers. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. What have your experiences been with muzzle velocities in rifles of the same caliber but different barrel lengths? Let me know by leaving a comment on this video right now. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and good hunting.